The Fantasy Show is presented by E-Trade. And now, your host, Matthew Berry.
Thank you, Jeff the Fish. We are the Not Ready for E1 players. In the next half hour, we're going to make you a smarter fantasy football player and a much dumber person. Today in the show, well, there's a quarterback change in Buffalo. We're going to get into that. The Week 11 rankings are out. We'll dive into those deeper. Plus, Mike Clay comes by to discuss the best wide receiver and quarterback matchups for Week 11. But first, Secret Squirrel. Today's show will be
on the TV you're watching in an airport.
I'm surprised, but I'll take it. So, huge news out of Buffalo today, and you're not going to
They finally admitted Buffaloes don't have wings?
No, it wasn't that. What they actually...
They finally became part of Canada?
No, that wasn't the news out of Buffalo.
I got it. Thurman Thomas found his football helmet.
Not that either, interrupting Squirrel. No, the big news out of Buffalo is that head coach Sean McDermott has benched Tyrod Taylor for rookie Nathan Peterman. So for those of you who have Tyrod Taylor on your roster, and by the way, he's rostered in almost 80% of leagues, you're going to need to make other plans for Sunday and probably the rest of the year as well. So should you grab Nathan Peterman? Look, he looked pretty solid last week, 7 of 10, 79 yards and a touchdown. But he entered the game down 40-3, okay? Until we see how Peterman performs in a non-blowout, I can't recommend rostering him, let alone starting him on Sunday. For this week, if you need somebody with a track record, and that's what I recommend, there are 4 veteran quarterbacks available in more than 50% of ESPN leagues. Starting with Eli Manning, he faces the Chiefs. Andy Dalton is at Denver. Fitzmagic, you want a little Fitzmagic? Ryan Fitzpatrick is at Miami, and Case Keenum, who was awesome last week, is home against the Rams. For the rest of the season, to replace Tyrod, my choice of those would be Dalton, who after Denver, and by the way, they're not the Broncos defense anymore, gets 4 of the next 5 at home. But for this Sunday only, actually, I prefer Eli Manning. Look, despite the disaster that is the Giants, Manning has averaged 14.9 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks. Do I think the Giants will lose big to the Chiefs this week? I do. But that means game flow should lead to lots of opportunities for Eli to throw. Don't forget, Kansas City top 10 in terms of most fantasy points allowed. So grab Eli for your fantasy team if you're looking for a quarterback this week. Just be sure not to grab any Giants for an actual football team. For those of you who have Bills on your roster, what do you do now that Tyrod Taylor has been benched for Nathan Peterman? First, all Buffalo pass catchers take a step back until we get a look at what Peterman can do. Look, he may ultimately prove to be a better thrower than Taylor, but until we see it, there's just no justification for starting Kelvin Benjamin this Sunday, who is already just a low-end wide receiver 3 against Chargers corner Casey Hayward. Charles Clay, look, I'm a little bit higher on him. There aren't a ton of great tight end options out there. Rookie quarterbacks are prone to dump it off to tight ends. It's within reason that Clay could get a lot of targets this week, but I'm still not sure he's 100% healthy. And again, we just don't know if there's any chemistry there. He's a high-end tight end 2 for me this week. So should you panic on all the Bills and jump through a table? Or should you stay strong, like the abs of a celebrating CFL player? I'm going CFL abs on this one. LaShawn McCoy is still LaShawn McCoy. Look, I know, he's had 2 tough weeks, but the volume will only increase with an inexperienced quarterback entering the lineup. And look at this upcoming schedule for the Bills, right? 2 games against the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Colts. They've got some bad chances left to take advantage of. You're not going to see a much better schedule down the stretch than that. So Bills Mafia, don't do anything rash. Stay strong on LaShawn McCoy. And frankly, try to trade for him if you see an opportunity.
Buzzing!
If your fantasy team is in a good playoff position, I have some great news for you. Your fantasy team is in a good playoff position. But I also have another great piece of news. As the rest of your league sweats making the playoffs, you can stock your roster with some legit fantasy superstars who are out of action right now, but can be stashed on your bench. And you'll get them back just as the fantasy playoffs begin. First up, Aaron Rodgers. Did you know he's eligible to return in Week 15? After beating the Bears, Green Bay now 5-4. If they win another game or 2, they're easily still in the playoff hunt in Week 15, which means you could definitely see Green Bay bringing back Aaron Rodgers, just in time for your fantasy playoffs. You know, Aaron, best quarterback in fantasy football, Rodgers, currently available in more than 60% of leagues. With just 1 week left of buys, your roster flexibility should ease up some, so why not stash him for the playoffs and see if he comes back?
When Double A runs on the waiver wire, stash him on your bench, stash him on your bench, stash him on your bench.
It's going to get weirder from there. Just trust me on this one. Next up, how about Greg Olsen, right? Unlike Rodgers, Olsen not on track to come back in the fantasy playoffs. He's on track to come back next week. That's right. Yet Greg Olsen, who was the third best fantasy tight end last year, still available in more than 40% of leagues. Go get him right now. He's back next week.
When Double G Olsen's sitting out there for you, stash him on your bench, stash him on your bench, stash him on your bench.
Tried to tell you. What about Ezekiel Elliott? He's available in just, well, 1% of leagues, right? Okay, but there's a good chance he's available via trade for not very much in return. Look, I wouldn't give up a ton for him, but if you have a stacked team already and you like your chances of playing in your league's finals, Elliott currently on track to come off of his suspension in Week 16 and Week 17. If you play in an ESPN Standard League where the finals are Week 16 and 17, Elliott a high upside stash for those who have already secured a playoff spot.
When you trade for Zeke E2LIO2T, then you'll stash him on your bench, stash him on your bench, stash him on your bench.
I don't think Crystal's getting a record deal out of this segment. I got to be honest with you guys. Finally, what about David Johnson, right? Available in more than 40% of leagues. I actually think he should be available in every league. He only just got his cast up on Monday. It's a bad offensive line. Adrian Peterson there. The team's under 500. I just think it's unlikely we see David Johnson again this season. So I'm not recommending adding David Johnson.
Matt doesn't want you to add David Johnson. I roll like a ball because I got it going on. That's right, I rhymed on and on.
So the Week 11 ranks are out on ESPN.com. My fellow rankers totally screwed up again. Like Marshawn Lynch, right? Take him, for example. I have him as running back 15 this week. Patriots have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. They have the worst yards per rush average in the league. Lynch had 16 touches in his last game. I think there's a good chance Marshawn gets into the end zone in what should be a high-scoring game. And yet Mike Clay, like maybe the biggest idiot I've ever met, somehow has him as running back 25, running back 25. Like what?
Hey, Matthew, I'm right here. I can explain that ranking.
Oh, hey, Mike. Good to see you, buddy. Listen, we're super busy on time, but can you come back later for wide receiver cornerback matchups?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, good. Great.
Ow. Ow.
What about Orleans Darkwa, right? I have Darkwa ranked as a viable flex play this week, while, like, the world's dumbest teenager, Field Yates, has him as running back 35. Like, what? How does Field not realize that Darkwa, one of only 4 running backs with 70 yards in back-to-back games, joining Ezekiel Elliott, Mark Ingram, and Le'Veon Bell? Or that the Chiefs allow the 2nd most yards per rush this year? So I want to turn to you, Secret Squirrel, for your opinion. You're a fantasy analyst that I 100% trust. And by the way, if I'm lying, may the puppet god strike you down. Well, what are you going to do?
Harry, it looks like you killed the squirrel. It's about time, if I'm being honest.
I honestly didn't know the puppet gods were that powerful, but now that Daniel's gone, Strawman, I guess you're the co-host by default.
Yeah, that's right, my friend. And it looks like I'm playing you this weekend in the Fantasy Show Fantasy Football League there.
Yes, we are. You and I are playing. I face the Strawman this week. So, Strawman, which running back do you like this week?
Well, as you know, Le'Veon Bell is on my team, and according to my Strawman analytics, he will have 75.3 points. But I also have Adrian Peterson, who you seem to be down on. However, he has 58 rushes in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's 21 more than any other running back.
Well, he is. I mean, the volume is certainly there for Adrian Peterson. My concern here is the Texans' defense, right? They've struggled against the pass, but against the run, they're actually a top 7 run defense this year. They've allowed the fewest rushing touchdowns this year, and DJ Humphrey's out for the year. That hurts that offensive line. I don't know. 21 for 29 last time we saw Peterson. He's outside my top 20 in PPR.
Fine,
Sorry,
fine.
Strawman.
Fine. But when I win, will you come in next week dressed like a juice box so I can slip you up?
Sure. I don't want to do that. I got to beat Strawman. Coming up after the break, we're going to answer your frequently asked questions. Juju Smith-Schuster, is he ranked too high? Is Drew Brees ranked too low? Secret Squirrel, nice to know you survived that lightning strike. So what are we doing now?
All right, now we are doing your frequently asked rankings questions for Week 11. All right, Matthew, this first one comes from Maine's 35. Demaryius Thomas or Juju this week? I love DT, but Juju is running good right now with a better matchup.
Yeah, and listen, I totally get the question there, right? You see my rankings here behind you. I have Juju Smith-Schuster over Demaryius Thomas. The fact of the matter is, since Week 8, Smith-Schuster, 26.5 fantasy points per game. That's the 2nd most by a wide receiver. Demaryius Thomas, meanwhile, has had 2 games with 75 yards or more all season long. Juju has 2 in his last 2 games. And then you think about this matchup, right? The Tennessee Titans, allowing the 9th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Cincinnati, who faces Denver, they allow the 5th fewest. I get it. Demaryius Thomas is a superstar, and Juju Smith-Schuster has just immediately come on. And I have them close to each other. But, yeah, if I had both those guys, give me Juju Smith-Schuster. Who's next?
Next up, Doug Wells wants to know, for this week, should I start Drew Brees or Jared Goff?
You know, it's an impressive thing that this is even a question. So hats off to Sean McVay, Greg Olson, the quarterback's coach of the Rams, and the job they've done with Jared Goff. Both guys, I mean, Goff's just been terrific this year. So the fact that it's even a question is really hats off to all of them. That said, Vikings top 10 defense in terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks. Brees is playing my Redskins this week, who've allowed over 18 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. They're ranked in the bottom 10. And you think about that one game against Buffalo, and it's so rush heavy, and people are like, they don't throw. Think about this. The Saints from weeks 1 through 9, Drew Brees threw over 34 pass attempts per game. That was 8th most by quarterbacks in that span. Jared Goff, meanwhile, ranking 25th in attempts per game this season among quarterbacks with at least 5 games played. So I understand it's hard not to react after the 1 week, but I'm still going with Drew Brees at home against my banged-up Redskins defense in that one. Who's next?
Next up, The Big Show says, checking out the rankings, why such a gap between Dion Lewis being much higher than Rex Burkhead?
Well, I actually have Rex Burkhead higher than Dion Lewis, right? I have Burkhead over Dion Lewis. You think about Burkhead, 15 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. He leads the Patriots running backs with over 30 fantasy points since week 8. 10 targets in the last 2 games for Burkhead. By the way, that's 5 times as many as Dion Lewis in that span. They're using Burkhead and James White, obviously, in the passing game. Did you know Burkhead has run 40 routes since week 8? That's 17 more than any other Patriots running back. Finally looks healthy for the first time all year. And I think the fact that Mike Gillislee was a healthy scratch last week should be a real eye-opener for me. Look, I actually think all running backs, Burkhead, Lewis, and James White, are viable because I think the Patriots score a lot of points. I think that's a high-scoring game between the Raiders and the Patriots. But, yeah, give me Rex Burkhead because that's who Belichick is giving the ball to, and he's more versatile than Dion Lewis, who they don't seem to want to use in the passing game that much. Who's next?
Next up, Xavi Alberto wants to know, do I go with Vernon Davis or Delaney Walker this week at tight end?
Yeah, the problem here is scheduling, right? So you think about Vernon Davis, like he's much more viable if Jordan Reed doesn't play. We don't know if Jordan Reed's going to play or not. We're certainly hopeful that he will. Delaney Walker plays Thursday night. You think about Delaney Walker, who's seeing almost 7 targets per game this year. That's top 7 among tight ends. And since week 7, Delaney Walker getting 8 targets per game. That's more than Davis, even while Davis's usage has increased, obviously, with the injury to Jordan Reed. Walker, by the way, has been targeted 6 times in the end zone this year. That's twice as many as Vernon Davis. Expect him to get in here. Mariota getting healthier as well. So, you know, it might be a much closer decision if we knew for a fact Jordan Reed wasn't going to play. But because you'll have to make the decision on Delaney Walker by Thursday night, I'm starting Delaney Walker over Vernon Davis this week. Because if Jordan Reed plays on Sunday, that obviously hurts Davis's value. All right, Secret Squirrel, who's next?
Last one, Derek Mousseau. Who should I drop among the following tight ends? Jordan Reed, Charles Clay, Vernon Davis, or Austin Seferian-Jenkins?
How do you have 4 tight ends on your team? Like, what league is this where you have 4 tight ends, my friend? Like, I wouldn't drop one of them. I think you have valuable tight ends there. I would try to trade one of them, any of them. The Redskins tight ends would be, honestly, if I could pick one, I would trade the Redskins tight ends, Vernon Davis and Jordan Reed, because when they both play, you still see some Davis love there. Honestly, it's so confusing there, and it's frustrating. And that way you get 2 guys off your roster and free up some roster space. But trade one of them. If no one will trade with you, and they should, because apparently there's no other tight ends left in your league, you've got them all on your roster, dude. If I have to drop one of them, honestly, Charles Clay for me, because we don't know if he's 100% healthy. We don't know what we're going to get out of Peterman. Seferian-Jenkins obviously doesn't play this week, but I actually like his schedule down the stretch. But, dude, try to trade one of them, even if it's for below market value, because, let's face it, you've got too many tight ends on your team. Listen, Secret Squirrel, I just want to say I'm super happy that you survived that segment. I'm glad you're still with us. Listen, and if I'm lying, may the puppet gods strike you down.
Matthew, I don't...
As week 11 is here, which means Mike Clay is here once again to talk about the receivers with the best and worst matchups of the week. All right, my friend, Who's number one? Who's got the best matchup?
All right, well, let's start out with Jeremy Maclin here. I mean, the Ravens receivers haven't been exceptional by any means this season.
That's the nicest thing anyone said about a Ravens receiver this year, by the way.
That's a fair point. But he's actually been okay, right, when he's been on the field. So I like the matchup this week. He's the primary slot man for the Ravens. He'll go up against Demarius Randall. They've kind of settled him in as the slot guy. And actually, if you include Devon House on the outside and Kevin King, the rookie, all three guys have really struggled with efficiency this season. So this actually applies to Mike Wallace on the other side, believe it or not. If you're desperate at the flex spot, Maclin, Wallace, not Perriman, but these two
Understood.
guys.
Well, and listen, off of the bye, maybe Maclin and Flacco have had time to get a little bit more chemistry, so that's nice. All right, who's next?
All right, next up, we're going to actually stick with the slot theme here and go with Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise. We've been talking about him all year. He has good matchups throughout the season. Primarily lines up in the slot about 65% of the time. So he'll see Kareem Jackson, the Texans, another team who have really struggled at cornerback and especially inside at the slot. So Fitzgerald, I mean, look at his production with Drew Stanton in 2 games, 11.5 targets per game. He's 11th in fantasy points at that spot. So he's getting the volume, has a good matchup. I think he's kind of quarterback proof this season so far anyway. If Blaine Gabbert's in there, I think he'll still be okay.
Especially when you think of this Texans defense, pretty good against the run. The way you move the ball against Houston is through the air. Pretty much everyone has done that the last couple of weeks.
Right.
So certainly, whether it's Gabbert or Stanton, you're looking for number 11 when you're going back to pass. All right, makes sense. All right, so who are some wide receivers with some bad matchups this week, Mike?
Yeah, we're going to flip to the other sideline, or the other side of the field, I should say, with this up and go with DeAndre Hopkins against Patrick Peterson, which, I mean, talk about a potential showdown of the year here, right? I mean, you have the number 1 scoring fantasy receiver and arguably the best cornerback in the NFL. Hopkins has been targeted on 32% of his routes this season. Peterson only 14%. I mean, it's one of them situations. You got a guy, like something has to give here, right? The guy that's really good at one spot and a guy that's going to be on him on, I'd say 85% of plays because Hopkins doesn't go to the slot very much.
No, he doesn't. So this will be a fun one. This is a get your popcorn ready and just sort of watch and enjoy this. Remember, like, Patrick Peterson has shut down every elite receiver he's seen. Mike Evans, when he had his big game against it, that was after Peterson went out. So this will be fun to watch. You have to obviously still start Hopkins in season long, but maybe you look somewhere else. All right, who's another wide receiver that we're looking at a bad matchup for this week?
Yeah, about the new toy up in Buffalo here, Kelvin Benjamin. He's going to go up against Casey Hayward, and I can't stress this enough. I know he's not a household name by any means, but Hayward has been terrific. In fact, he shadowed quite a bit this season. Demarius Thomas twice, Amari Cooper, Alshon Jeffrey. He's been shadowing throughout the year. But when he lines up on his side of the field, 70% of the time he's been at left corner. The Chargers are allowing 7.2 fantasy points per week to that spot. That is lowest in the NFL. So he's been dominant in every capacity. Expect him to shadow Benjamin. And actually, he did last year. They played Carolina, the Chargers did. He shadowed on 23 of 26 routes. 4 targets, 1 catch, 11 yards. And that actually came when he was on someone else. So he completely erased him from that game.
Right. 1 catch from 11 yards. And then you think about the change of quarterback for Buffalo. We just don't know what you're going to get out of Nathan Peterman. I don't know how you could trust Benjamin in your lineup this week until we see more. Tough matchup there. Thank you, Mike Clay, as always. Time now for Make History, presented by Jim Beam. You know, no wide receiver has more fantasy points per game since week 8 than Robert Woods. Guy had a pre-ADP of wide receiver 74. And by the way, after this huge production, still somehow available in a quarter of fantasy leagues. He needs to be rostered in every single league, America. Come on. We're coming back with Don't Be This Guy.